Welcome to another Adventures in Fly Tying episode on Fly Fish Ohio. I'm your host, Joe Cornwall. Today we have a really interesting pattern for you. This fly is called the Llama. And this pattern, let me tell you a little bit about the history of this pattern, at least the history with me. Back around 1978 or so, a guy by the name of Eric Leiser came out with this book, Fly Tying Materials. This book was very influential because at that point in time, I was very much into hunting and gathering and getting my materials, and Eric really went into the whole idea of how to treat materials, but he also was a proponent of using unusual materials. And what he wrote about in this book was a fly that I don't think he created, but he certainly popularized, and that fly is the Llama. Wonderful little streamer fly that is notorious on brown trout. It's actually excellent pretty much on any kind of a waterway. Wonderful pattern. Now what's so unique about this particular fly is that it is tied, the wing material is tied with fur from a woodchuck. And what makes this unique is we're not going to use the tail of the woodchuck, we're actually going to use the guard hairs and the underfur. And Eric was very specific about using this underfur that was part of this and making sure that stayed inside of the wing. The other materials that this fly is going to be tied from would include grizzly hackle, and that's going to be the tail and the hackle at the front of the fly. The body is going to be red floss, and we're going to rib that with oval gold tinsel. Let's get started and tie this fly. We're going to tie this on a Daiichi 1720 size 6 streamer hook. You can use any turn down eye, 3X or 4X long streamer hook. Works beautifully. Not really specific about what kind of a hook you need to use. Sizes, size 6, 8s, and 10s are what Eric Leiser tied and what he recommends, and it all really depends on the size of the woodchuck. Big woodchuck, big hook, small woodchuck, small hook. This is a 3X or 4X turn down eye streamer hook. Place that in your vise. Lay down a smooth thread body to the point right above where you want to tie in that tail, which will be right above the hook's point. The tail material is a little bit of this grizzly hen hackle. So we'll strip a little bit off. Once again, we want that to be relatively sparse. Measure that out. It should be about the same as the hook's gape. Capture that material with just a wrap or two. Tail material is tied in. I want to add now what I'm going to use for the ribbing, which is oval gold tinsel. Now, when I tie in the tinsel on a pattern like this, I like to tie that material in so that the tinsel actually runs up the shank of the hook and forms a smooth underbody for that floss. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to lay down a thread base over that, once again just to make sure I have a smooth underbody for that floss. I'm going to tie the floss in at the head of this fly. You could use floss, you could use red wool, you could use red dubbing if you wanted to. I'm going to use a little bit of floss for this. If you want to get a brighter body, use white thread and then switch to black thread for the head. If you want a darker body, you can use black thread because the floss will go semi-translucent. Now when you're working with floss like this, it's important as you're wrapping, first of all, don't slide your hands down the floss because that'll cause it to fray, but also try to hold that floss so that you're as perpendicular to the hook shank as possible. Wrapping back, carefully touching, so we end up with a smooth underbody. The first layer is going to be the color, and then the top layer will really smooth that out. If I make a mistake with the floss and start holding it at an angle, you're going to see that the strands of that floss will begin to separate and it'll begin to fray. So that's why it's so important to hold this at a constant perpendicular angle and tie with a constant tension as we move back to the point where we tie it in that oval gold braid. When I get to the point where I've tied in the tail, I'm going to lift that bit of tinsel up, make a couple of 3 wraps behind it. Now that locks the floss and the rib material, so if something should get broken, that rib material won't come off the back of the hook. I'm going to lay that second layer, once again, smooth turns, heading forward. You could actually even do this if you wanted to, I think, with like a red nylon monocord thread. So if you really wanted to condense this down and have even a simpler kind of a pattern, you could, instead of using the floss, you could use even a red thread body. A lot of times when I'm tying this for a fishing fly, I like to use a red wool body. I think the wool adds just a little bit of bulk to it. That can sometimes be nice as well. But the traditional pattern was tied with a floss body. We're getting close to the end of that. There we go. I want to maintain some good thread discipline up on the head here, so I'm just going to tie that in with a couple of wraps of thread. That'll lock that down and clip that away. Now I want to bring in my oval gold tinsel ribbing. Traditionally on a streamer, it is 5 to 6 turns. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 6th turn will finish that out. So we've got a nicely ribbed body. Once again, just 1 or 2 wraps of thread to hold that material in. Now comes the secret of Eric Leiser's Llama. The interesting thing about this pattern is he specified a really unusual material, as I've mentioned, and that is woodchuck. And this is a woodchuck pelt. Now, the material we're not going to use is not from the tail of the woodchuck, but is actually from the back of the animal, and you'll see that there's dark black or dark gray underfur right there. Very, very pretty. He specifies that you leave that underfur in the fly. So I'm going to clip this out from the back. There's the material. Now what you will notice is, look, you have the white tips, black bar, gray, black bar. That's the length of that fly. You want it to go out to the end of the tail, and that really determines your hook size, is how that barring is on the woodchuck pelt. Do not get rid of that underfur. You don't want to comb that out, but we're going to tie that in with a couple of tight thread wraps to hold that in. You want that to be sparse. You don't want to use a lot of material there. So we're going to hold that in kind of sparse. That's the wing. Now, the next step is to tie in a hackle. You could do a bearded hackle, which is very traditional on a wet fly. Once again, Eric Leiser, and I don't think he invented this pattern, as I'd mentioned, but he certainly did popularize it this way, specified using a swept hackle like you would use on a wet fly. And I think that gives us just a little bit more action in the water. So we're going to take our grizzly hackle, we're going to lock that in with 1 or 2 thread wraps, and just like if I was tying a wet fly, I'm going to fold that hackle over.
That's great.
I think I might have had too much coffee today.
Good. Thank you.
I'm going to wrap a true hackle like I would for a wet fly, a surrounding hackle. Just a couple of wraps. I really don't need any more than about 2 wraps of hackle. Tie that off. Flip out the excess. Now to make this work on a streamer fly, what we want to do is we want to sweep that back. Just take our thread, tie a neat thread head. Eric Leiser did specify on this pattern a white pupil with a black iris, a painted eye, so you can have a slightly larger head on that. We're going to go ahead and give a whip finish right there. I am not going to tie or paint the eye on that. We'll add just a little bit of glue to this. I think I have some Sally Hansen's over here.
We've had nothing but rain here. No big coats on.
By the way, if you ever want to make sure that you're clearing out the eye of your hook, just the end of a feather like that will clean the eye of that hook just beautifully. And there you have it, Eric Leiser's Llama, circa 1978. I have fished this fly since this book came out. The copy I showed you, I bought in 1978. I've fished this fly since 1978. I've caught everything from brown trout, rainbow trout, perch, smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, rock bass. It's a lovely little streamer fly, very traditional. It's a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining us on Adventures in Fly Tying at Fly Fish, Ohio as we tied the Llama. We'll see you on the next episode. Tight lines.